Hello, Masonic Lite listeners. This is Josh. Since we recorded this episode, the situation with the coronavirus has resulted in the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania making the wise decision to halt all Masonic activity within our lodges through May 1st. Some events mentioned in this episode have been canceled or postponed, including, unfortunately, the chicken pot pie dinner fundraiser for a dear brother. It might be a rough couple of months, so please, wash your hands, stay safe, and maybe think about just staying home.
From the new recording lair located deep beneath the Wine and Spirit store in Ephrata, Pennsylvania.
You're listening to the Masonic Lite Podcast.
Studio 665 presents Masonic Lite Podcast. This show is recorded by Masons, for Masons, and is for entertainment purposes only. And please, no wagering.
This podcast is not endorsed by any Grand Lodge, and the ridiculous ramblings of the hosts are their own. And now, here's your host.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Episode 93.
93.
Is it really?
Larry, there's a microphone. You have to get closer.
Oh, I do. Okay.
There you go.
Episode 93. Can you believe it?
Wow.
I'm your host, Pete, and in studio with me tonight are Tim, Larry, and Josh. And Jack is here. He's out in the hallway talking to our district deputy
He got
about.
called to the principal's office.
Yeah, we started out
So to speak.
we started out the phone call with him or the show with him on speakerphone, and he's like, "Yeah, you're not going to want to put this on the air." And then they just walked out. And I go, "Oh my goodness." So maybe we're all getting our cards pulled.
Yeah, we'll know soon.
All right, this episode is brought to you through the support of our Patreons. For as little as $1 per month, you can help keep the Masonic Lite podcast on the air.
$1.
Just visit patreon.com/Masonic Lite podcast to sign up. You know, as of this morning, Larry, guess how many sponsors we have?
Sponsors.
How many patrons?
Patrons.
Oh, I'd say 32.
Larry, I sent you the notes earlier. You should know
you
this.
did.
We have 28.
20. Hey, that's good.
Yeah.
Hey.
You were close.
Whoa.
You know what would be even better is if we got two more and had 30.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Or 33.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or 33 would
Or
be
33
great.
would be cool.
Yeah.
$1 a month, boys
Magic.
and girls.
Right. And, you know, if you guys wonder what we're spending money on, it's, I wish it was liquor and
No dose for
Cigars.
and things, but it's not. It's for rent. It's for cable. And hopefully,
a video camera soon.
yeah, hopefully. Yeah, we have a webcam that's like 15 years old.
1983.
Well, it died tonight.
You're right.
It totally died tonight.
Oh,
Thank
goodness. So later on the show, we're going to hear an interview from author and brother Ronald Bates, who is the author of Shakespeare's Lost Purple Bloodline. It's very interesting. It's I don't know how we just spoke with Ron. We're still digesting it, but we'll come back. We'll come back.
A lot
to
of
that.
genealogy.
Yes. And also on our show tonight, we're going to be hearing from our resident Pennsylvania Dutchman, Dutchie Doug.
Dutchie Doug. I love Dutchie Doug.
Masonic Lite podcast symbologist Michelle Snyder. Josh, are we going to hear some Jim Stevens?
We will hear from Jim Stevens.
I'm on the edge of my seat. I don't even need the whole seat. Brother Walter Cronkite will handle the Masonic news, and our closing thoughts by our own Larry Maris.
Yes.
So we're going to briefly go around and see what everybody's been up to. Tim, you handle this. I've talked enough.
Okay. Well, for me, most recently, just the usual monthly stated meetings at Eureka West Shore Lodge number 302. And just this past week, we had a stated meeting of Samuel C. Perkins Royal Arch Chapter. Had a really good program on a lot of the actually some of the more esoteric pieces of the Royal Arch degree, which I thought was pretty interesting. But it's actually been a quiet couple of weeks Masonically, which is kind of nice. We're down to 3 NPDs, the non-payment of dues for folks, which is great for a lodge our size. It's actually great for a lodge of any size. But our audit is done and approved, so it's been a good few weeks.
Larry, have you done anything Masonically?
Masonically, other than the Goose and Gridiron breakfast, not really. And that's because for the past couple of weeks, I even had to miss lodge meeting last week. I had toe surgery, and I can't put a shoe or a sock on.
Those Crocs are looking sharp.
Yeah.
I had to beat
Crocs.
all the women off of you on the way into the building tonight.
So, no, I haven't.
Jack, you looks like you got comfortable. What have you been up to Masonically in the past couple weeks?
The past couple weeks, I continued to do my candidate instruction, which some people call mentoring, but it's really more instruction now than mentoring. I sat junior warden yesterday at our stated meeting, and we had a visitor with us. There is a gentleman in Lancaster who is from Cuba, and he is in desperate straits trying to find a place to live. He was the house that he was renting a room in was converted into a family residence, and he was put out on the street, and he's having a really difficult time. And I am having a difficult time finding any place to help him get established.
So if anybody's in the Ephrata area,
if you hear this, yeah, let's.
You can't see it, and we can't do it for the profane, but we're throwing the distress signals silently.
So there's that, and then I just got off the phone with our district deputy, and
Are you still a member?
I'm gonna make the announcement, but every event at the Masonic Villages in Elizabethtown is canceled,
Ooh, that would including
Treichler Lodge and the Academy of Masonic Knowledge.
That's
Wow, there
that
goes my notes.
Yeah, well, there goes our interview.
well
That
given
announcement will come out tomorrow.
Yeah, given the what's been going on around, and I mean, just earlier as we're recording this, earlier today they announced the NCAA tournament's going to be played.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, like,
In an empty room.
if you're listening to this 3 years from after we record it, we're
if
in
any of us are still around,
right. This is the beginning of the coronavirus issue.
Play the cricket sound effect.
Yeah.
chirp, 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 chirp.
This episode's in memoriam of the Masonically podcast crew. So, Jack, I was with you for one thing that,
What did I forget? Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much we can tell, but there's a new grotto looking to get started in Chester County.
It is a nascent grotto that's just sort of percolating right there and ready to blossom into a gorgeous flower of tomfoolery.
Yes.
Can you give the name?
It's going to be called Beersheba.
Beersheba, that's right.
And apparently, that's a city in Israel.
It actually is or
Yes,
was.
yeah.
Until the incident.
It's in the Old Testament.
The Mason Ralph Bacon Poppy Huerta, who is spearheading this adventure, wrote a beautiful story about this town of Beersheba and why his grotto should be named Beer, capital B, Sheba, capital S, Beer Sheba Grotto. So,
But we met with some of the guys. They seemed fun, and I think it could work out. We'll see.
it's a good group.
Josh, have you done anything, Mr. Worshipful Master?
We had our stated meeting that I'll remind everybody that Larry did not attend. And then we had
Larry is at risk.
yeah, district deputy
You're playing the
official
at-risk
visit
card.
at
Nice.
Mannheim Lodge.
Ah.
And that was all right. I mean, it was great.
Oh my goodness!
Oh, it's
Well,
nice to laugh again.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, you're going to hear an interview we just had with brother Ronald Bates. It's part genealogist, part I don't know, part conspiracy theorist, we'll see. but he's the author of the book Shakespeare's Lost Purple Bloodline. And then follow up with us for some more show after that.
Enjoy.
Why choose George J. Grove & Sons for your next home improvement project? At George J. Grove & Sons, we've built our reputation on quality and trust for more than 50 years. From planning to materials to installation, George J. Grove promises a home improvement experience second to none. Whether your goal is reducing energy costs, decreasing maintenance, updating curb appeal, or simply increasing the value of your home, the George J. Grove team will recommend and provide solutions that stand the test of time. Call 717-393-0859 for an estimate or visit us at georgejgrove.com. Welcome back, everybody. Our guest tonight is Brother Ronald Bates. He's a member of Lodge 313, located in Sullivan, Ohio. And he took the York Rite path, which some of us do, some of us don't, from the York Rite path all the way through and became a constituted Knight Templar in 2011 in Worcester, Ohio. Commandery 48, I believe. Isn't that right, Ron?
That's correct.
Yeah. And you actually completed the book that Pete introduced in 2018, Shakespeare's Lost Purple Bloodline. Tell us about your book.
It's kind of a national treasure meets Da Vinci Code meets Roots. And what I mean by that is
That's good. I like
wow. I researched every single generation back, and I've got every chapter in every family, and I've made a complete bloodline or a family tree back to King Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth I.
Now, how did you stumble across them by just accident, or did you have like legend and lore in your family that you were somehow connected to those folks?
You hit it right on the head. To tell you the little story there, my great-grandmother, she called all the children in, and she asked us a question: what would you do to change the world? And we were all kids, and we had to write down what we would do to change the world. And then she said, you need to remember that it's very, very, very important that our grandparents changed the world a long, long time ago. They were all knights, and they took care of Queen Elizabeth I. She was the center of our family. They took care of the kings and queens for many, many centuries, and they were the best writers the English language ever knew. I could go on and on about this, but if you have any questions, just stop me.
So you had some idea that your bloodline went back there. So how did you track it? I mean, I know being Catholic, the Catholic Church has good records, but your ancestor kind of broke up with the Catholic Church. So,
yes, all I did was got on Ancestry.com, and to continue a little bit with my grandmother's story, she said our grandparents were the best writers the English language ever knew. They had ways of hiding their names in the books they wrote, and they wrote stories about what they did. They did a project that when the world finds out what they did, it would leave the world in awe. They created secret societies, and the greatest thing that they wanted to do in the world was have the Bible written in English. When I went into Ancestry, I typed in my great-grandmother's name, and it led me straight back to Mary Sidney Herbert, who Mary Sidney and her brother Philip Sidney translated the Bible into English, and that was a story that my grandmother had told me. So I basically just had the entire bloodline right there, and then I went in and researched Google, Wikipedia, every single member of that bloodline, and that's what I used to write my book.
Wow. So when you're mentioning, so is your book all historical, or is there a fictional component to it?
I'll say it's 99% historical.
Okay, so the title is with Shakespeare. So I understand where you're linking there with the greatest writer, but what I got out of the book was that there's a lot of people that do not believe that Shakespeare actually wrote Shakespeare's writings.
That's correct.
So what is your belief, or what is your assumption or hypothesis of what went on without us having to read the book?
And if you see my book, then you know some of the things I've written about. The why not Shakespeare highlight. He was a play broker. He did sell a couple of plays, but he scribbled his name and he spelled his name different every time. And I've got a closet full of books, and I tried to sum it up and not, people write 1,000-page books on this, and mine is very short. One of the things is Queen Elizabeth was a virgin queen, so she had no children. However, at the same time, she endorsed a book which said that God so loved that godly queen that he secretly preserved and magnified her offspring. So that's a book she endorsed. The queen made a law that she actually enforced, that no one could speak of the queen's children unless they were one of her natural issue, which is a dumb law. And then thirdly, there were bishops that were reporting to the Pope about the queen's children. So there's 3 smoking guns. You have to wonder what was going on. They started, the whole family started secret societies. One of those was the Areopagus, which was for the propagation of the English language. I don't really know what that word means, but that's what I read.
Okay.
The other is the Knights of the Golden Helmet. And then Sir Francis Bacon, there's been a lot written about him, that he perhaps revised Freemasonry and actually wrote the first 3 degrees. And what I'd like to do, now that I've shared that little bit with you, is to take you on a couple of minute history where if you were designing a society and you wanted to leave breadcrumbs to your generation, this is how I think you would do it.
Okay. We'll follow along.
Okay. So, like I say, my great-grandmother said our grandparents, the greatest thing they wanted was the Bible written in English. The first guy after the Catholic Church declared that the Bible could only be written in Latin. Well, the English wanted the living word in their own language. So a guy by the name of John Wycliffe, he started handwriting the Bible and translating it. After he was dead, the clergy came, dug up his bones, they crushed them, and then they scattered his bones into the river so that there was no remembrance of him evermore. After him was a guy by the name of John Huss. He was one of John Wycliffe's followers. When he died and was burned at the stake, they say that he was some of the books that Wycliffe had handwritten, the Bibles, were actually used in the fire. His last words were, "In 100 years, a man will be raised whose voice you will not suppress." Almost 100 years later exactly, Martin Luther came along. He was called to the Diet of Worms, and while he was in the Diet of Worms, almost to speak out against the church could be a death sentence. But in his ending, he said, "I will not, I shall not, I cannot retract what I have said against the Catholic Church, for to do so would be against my conscience and against God. Have mercy on my soul. Amen." I just thought that was kind of neat. I will not, I shall not, and I cannot. And he's practically talking about a death sentence. Then there was a guy, William Tinsdale. He was working with Martin Luther throughout Europe to translate the Bible into English. He coined more words in English than Shakespeare, and for that he was given the name the Great Architect of the English language. Before he was burned at the stake, his last words were, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes." And then along comes Henry VIII. At first, he was buying up all the books that Tinsdale was printing, and he was burning them for the Pope. He wanted the Pope's favor so that he could marry Anne Boleyn. The Pope wouldn't give him permission, so he finally decided, you know what? I'm the head of the church. He then made it so that an English Bible was put on every pulpit in England. That's a pretty big move towards the English Bible. Henry was known as the Lion. His coronation was June 24th, otherwise known as St. John's Day. His and Anne Boleyn's initials are carved into a castle in England that you can still see to this day. The carving is 2 pillars, and then in between the 2 pillars is a compass with a square placed over top of it. And then lastly, you get to the rumored mother of all of these writers, Elizabeth I. She wore a dress that had ears and eyes all over it because it was said she saw and heard everything. And that's as far as you go. Now, we didn't tell any secrets there, but if you think about that, and you've been through the degrees, I should have said a lot of buzzwords that, wow, that's in the history of the writing of the English Bible.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a lot of stuff to digest. So
I want to go, Ron, Larry here. I want to go back to Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. I think all of our lives we were brought up to believe she never had any children.
Yep.
But actually, for the past few years, I've been reading that she probably had a few. And through your research, you mentioned that Robert Dudley was probably her husband. And that they bore, 5 or 6 children, including the possibility of Francis Bacon as a child. So what's your take on that? Were you shocked when you found that out?
I was. My grandmother, we even asked as kids, so Elizabeth was the center of our family, were any of our grandparents kings or queens? And she said, no, none of them. And she was almost fearful that we could think that. Well, as I did the research, every one of the knights and the ones that were around her that were my grandparents, if you read about their great-grandmother or great-grandfather, they were like a son or a daughter. They were just either a grandchild or a great-grandchild of a king, so I didn't know why my grandmother had come up with that, because they all were nobility, and basically all nobility comes from a king a few generations back.
Do you think that English history recognizes the fact that she had children? What's your take on that?
I don't think so. It seems to be almost a religion.
Okay. Well, then the next question I want to ask you is, if that's the case, if they believe that, why do they think that William Shakespeare wrote all these plays and poems? Is that also a myth? What does your research say about that?
You're talking to a guy who would say that absolutely is 100% a myth.
I'm guessing you're going with the Bacon theory.
Edward de Vere's signature in a book that back then they were saying one of the Lord Chamberlains had to sign for the play before it went to production, and there were 2 Lord Chamberlains at the time, and the one was shutting down the playhouses, and the other was the writer Edward de Vere. So they were suggesting that. Well, I had known from my research and reading a book, Edward de Vere, Queen Elizabeth's Son, I believe was the name of it. And there they go to the 46th Psalm, and they say the 46th word from the beginning is will, or shake, and the 46th word from the end is spear. So I looked at the dedication to that play, and I counted 30 words from the end, and it's the word were, 2 capital V's to make the W, and I said, well, right there is Veer. And then I counted 30 words from the beginning, and I got the word duh. Well, I took a ruler and I laid it across the V to cross it out, so I had veer. And then I laid it across the word the to cross out the H, so I had the E. And the two words were the worth. And then I drew and I noticed, wow, that's the heading of the title. It's straight up and down with the ruler. And I said, well, you know what? We work with squares. Let me go grab a square. So I took a square and I put it on that line and I dropped it down equal to the heading on the other side, and I had EWOR. I said, okay, Edward Veer. It's missing a D. So what? We also find F. Bacon, and I believe it's in The Tempest is F. Bacon for Francis Bacon, so I can miss a D. And also in Shakespeare's sonnets, the 22nd or 24th, I forget which one, it said, every word doth almost reveal my identity. And people have written every word is but for a letter, Edward de Vere. So you find their signatures written, but missing a letter or two.
What is your thought as to why they hid why they would have made this a secret? Why not own up to writing some of these works?
For one, they wanted to prove the project they were doing, so they needed to write directions. And I no sooner got done writing my book and I reread it, and I said, they didn't just write Shakespeare, they did something bigger than this. And I kind of want to keep some of those cards close to my to hip, because I'm talking right now to someone who is possibly interested in making some kind of a movie with me. But generally, have you ever heard of a place called Oak Island?
I've heard all about it, and I've seen the Money Pit and all that stuff. But
if I were to tell you that I've found a map with different things that they wrote and used both Freemasonry, the map in Washington, D.C., Oak Island, and a map that I drew or I had to discover across the world. And it led me to a place that I had to go. And last year I went up there, and I wanted to go out in the middle of the woods where my map ended to see what I could find.
So you went to Oak Island. Okay.
I went into the wilderness, let's say.
Okay, metaphoric. Okay, into the wilderness.
But I did visit Oak Island also while we were up there. My son, who is also a Templar down in Columbus, he said, "You're not going anywhere without me." So we both went together. We went out in the middle of the woods where there should be nothing, and I told him, I said, "It's this many feet, this many feet." It was basically the roughest environment. And when we got there, there was some kind of an indent in the ground, and we took pictures and filmed it. And that's why we're getting people that are kind of interested in this. And this map I've cut different pieces out, and I can take paintings of, say, George Washington laying the foundation of the Capitol building, and I can hold them up to that and show you. And I have done this at work and other places, and people are amazed. They said, "I can't believe it. They left their signature in this odd way that they were part of building this map."
What kind of so I mean, the book is entitled Shakespeare. Have you gotten a lot of feedback from any scholars or any people that are more, I guess, Shakespeare centric and not? We come from the Masonic point of view on this show, but what about from the Shakespeare point of view?
I've honestly not shared a lot, and nor have I pushed it. They offered to put me on talk shows, different things like this, and they said, "That'll push your book." It was never really about pushing it out there to anyone. It was about mostly just a family endeavor, so that it's a legacy 5 generations after I'm gone, somebody will read it and say, wow, this guy took the time and effort to remember all of this. But now I'm on a different journey that goes further than that book.
So I'm a little more lowbrow in my thinking. So when I read through Shakespeare, one of the things that jumped out to me, and this is going to be kind of a little quiz for you.
Okay.
So we counted that there were 74 different scripted deaths in Shakespeare's novels or sonnets and plays. So I'm just going to ask, what do you think the top 4 methods of death are, to see if we can find a Masonic connection here? So what do you think the top 4 ways that people were killed in Shakespeare's plays? Anybody but Tim can chime in.
I got disqualified after the groundhog quiz.
That would be poisoning, burning at the stake, stabbing, drawn and quartered.
All right.
Boiling was a big one.
Ron, do you have any suggestions?
I would say poisoning, being stabbed. I don't recall too much being burned at the stake, but.
All right, Josh, do you have any, or can you read my notes? Yeah.
Coronavirus?
I don't exist.
Oh, all right. Well, you guys got 2, which means you're pretty good Masons. Stabbed and poisoned, or stabbed and poisoned. There was somebody that was stabbed and poisoned,
right.
But you forgot beheaded.
Yeah.
And then the number 2 one, smothered by pillow. Apparently, Shakespeare used to smother a lot of people with a pillow. But,
I'd like to personally thank you for this research.
So this is where I understand when you went down this rabbit hole. I started reading about Shakespeare, and I started reading about Sir Francis Bacon, and then I got off on a tangent about how people got killed. So
Bacon.
I think it's also interesting to note that in all the Shakespeare plays and sonnets, Freemasonry was mentioned in some form or another, about 157 times?
Yeah.
Where would that be, Larry or Ron?
You're going to ask me to quote a play? It is in Google.
I do know that in Shakespeare you'll find them calling out, look, it's my old worshipful master. And they also mention, what should I do with it? And they say, let her in half.
Wow.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Larry, thanks for never mentioning that in 4 years of the show. I mean, you could have brought that up sooner.
Well, we're talking about a topic, and I don't want to overwhelm the topic, but I'm a keen believer, and I believe, like Ron, that Shakespeare never wrote a damn thing.
So Ron, so Ron, you joined the Masonic Lodge back in like 2008, 2009 era.
Correct.
What led you to join? Why did you want to join the lodge?
The first thing I found when I was doing the genealogy was Mary Sidney, who translated the Book of Psalms into English. And then I read about her a book. And in that book, it told how she created so many words in the English language, and that people couldn't differentiate between her writings or William Shakespeare's. And the only thing that historians could agree on was that either she borrowed from Shakespeare or Shakespeare borrowed from her. And then I saw that her 2 sons, the incomparable pair of brethren, the one, William Herbert, was a Grand Master of the Lodge back in the early 1600s. And I said, I got to know what this is about.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Jack, did you had something?
No, you were just talking about Masonic references in Shakespeare, and there is one that we hear when we talk about traveling upon the level of time toward that undiscovered country. That's straight out of Shakespeare.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. And Ron, did you find any more correlations when you got into commandery, or did the kind of, or that kind of spun away a little bit from Shakespeare and Bacon?
Actually, when I got my 3rd degree, I stood up and I told a little spiel about, I found out my great-grandparents way back, and I told a little about my grandmother saying that our grandparents were the best writers the English language ever knew. And I said, I just wondered what my trail is. I have to get more education in Masonry. And one of the older guys in the lodge came over and sat next to me, and he said, keep going. You're going to find things in your family tree that are very, very controversial. And, of course, the main thing I think of now, looking back, is a virgin queen having kids.
Yeah.
That's pretty controversial.
Yeah.
There was only one before her.
Yeah, right.
There was another fellow who helped me on my first 3 degrees. I would study with him, and he was an older guy in the lodge, had been through most degrees. I don't know exactly how far, but I asked him one day, I said, I've got all these things that there was these different people that wrote Shakespeare, and they're all my grandparents, and my grandfather and his brother were the incomparable pair of brethren that Shakespeare was dedicated to. And he pointed his finger at me, and he said, first you're going to learn about Solomon's Lodge. Then later you'll learn about your grandparents. And so I expected all the way through York Rite, I'm going to learn something. And nobody ever mentioned anything about that. So I was a little disheartened.
If somebody wanted to get a hold of your book, what's the best way?
Amazon.
Okay, so just do go to Amazon and just do a search for. Let me pull up the was it Shakespeare's Lost Purple Bloodline?
Correct.
I always like shuffle my notes when we're talking, and then I don't have them. Okay, well, definitely keep us posted. I know you don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but if you're going to have a big reveal, please keep us in mind to be part of it.
Oh, will do.
Well, Ron, I want to thank you for coming on. Gentlemen, do you have anything else?
Thanks for being on the show. Oh, how do they go about getting his book?
On Amazon, we covered that.
Did we cover that?
You were snoring.
See, okay.
See, this is what we have to deal with Larry. He's in charge of our technical stuff.
Or repeating again, you can get it on Amazon.
At the historic Smithton Inn of Ephrata, Pennsylvania, we're pleased to serve the latest creations from Weathered Vineyard Winery, along with spirits from Thistlefinch Distillery in Lancaster, all to be experienced in the tasting room of a beautifully restored 18th century bed and breakfast. Cigars by D&S Cigar are available for your enjoyment in the courtyard. The historic Smithton Inn is convenient to Lancaster County's most interesting attractions, just minutes from the Ephrata Cloister and the Green Dragon Farmers Market, and a short drive can get you to charming Lidditz, thriving downtown Lancaster, as well as Hershey, Bird in Hand, and Intercourse, or Valley Forge and Gettysburg. Whether you're looking for a romantic getaway or an active vacation full of sightseeing and attractions, the historic Smithton Inn will be a welcoming oasis from everyday life, one that you'll want to visit again and again. Stop in and visit at 900 West Main Street in Ephrata, Pennsylvania, or check out our website at historicsmithtoninn.com, or simply call us at 717-733-6094. Just ask for Pastmaster Dave.
Hey, and we're back. We just heard from Brother Ronald Bates. I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot to digest there, but I would recommend that you pick up a copy of the book and you read it.
Yeah, go to Amazon. It's a real easy pickup, and
it does a lot of good research on the family tree, and just it's good stuff. So hey, where'd you get that shirt, Tim?
I got it at the store for the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction.
Wow, what is that called? The Masonic Marketplace, I think.
It's called the Masonic Marketplace.
Yeah. Yeah, so go to Scottish Rite, NMJ, Scottish Rite, N for Northern, M for Masonic, and J for Jurisdiction.org, and check it out. You can buy cool stuff, and you can see when all the upcoming degrees are going to be in different areas, or plays, as Larry likes to say.
Plays.
Oh, you know what? I just wonder when we're sitting here, what do you think our friend Dutchie Doug is up to?
You know, it's funny you should say that, Pete. I actually have a communication from him.
Oh, well, let's hear it.
Gute Dog lieber Brüder. That's Pennsylvania Dutch for hello, dear brothers. Here's Dutchie Doug bringing an update from my lodge, the Broken Plow number 377. The last time I gave everyone an overview and introduction about our lodge. This time I need to tell you all about the goings-on at our last stated meeting. Last month during the reading of the minutes, Brother Eli Iwahuza snuck out of the lodge room to attend to the facilities. Now what you have to know is that our facilities is an outhouse just a few paces due east of the temple. And we're quite proud of our outhouse. It's a 2-seater. That way you can encourage the guy next to you. Anyway, Brother Eli was out there, and while taking care of his business, the floorboards cracked and down he went. Guess he had overindulged in the pot pie during dinner. Brother Eli is what we call pretty rond, if you know what I mean. Now for those of you city folks who have never used an outhouse before, let me tell you something. There's nothing stopping your fall except, well, you know, the stinky brown stuff. Now our pit's a good 30 feet down, so Brother Eli wasn't just going to be able to climb back out. After about a good 10 minutes, a lot of the brothers started to wonder what had happened to Eli. Brother Jimmy Hingelhaus, our trusty sentinel, stepped outside to see what he could see. He immediately heard Brother Eli's muffled shots for help. Brother Jimmy ran back in without knocking. It was an emergency, for goodness sake, and announced in a loud and audible tone of voice, "Eli fell down the hole." Worshipful Master Appleschnitz quickly and unceremoniously called the craft off from labor. We all ran outside, except for Brother Donnie Schlover, who had fallen asleep on the sidelines. As we congregated around the hole, we weren't quite sure what to do. Luckily, one of the brothers ran back into the lodge and grabbed a cable tow. Down she went. Brother Eli's hands were so smeary from the you-know-what that he had a hard time grabbing hold of the rope. One of the brothers yelled out, "Just clean your hands, you dumb bunny." In the meantime, Brother Donnie had woken up and came outside. He was so fahoodled that he thought we were doing the Royal Arch degree and was ready to help Brother Eli out of the quote-unquote vault. Brother Eli finally got the cable tow wrapped around his waist, gave the nod, and up we pulled him. When he finally got back on solid ground, he was pretty ripe, if you know what I mean. We hosed him off right then and there. A motion was made and quickly seconded to fix the outhouse floor and to reinforce it so that something like this will never happen again. Slowly we made our way back into the lodge room. Brother Eli headed home, and we closed the meeting in peace and harmony, a lot more tired than we were when it started. Let's hope that next month will be a little less eventful. Till next time, work hard, stay plumb, and out in the lights when you leave the room.
And we're back. So
It's good you were paying attention.
So anyway, for the first 4 or 5 years of this show, anytime I'd ever talk, I talked about things from a former executive officer, a former worshipful master or monarch point of view. I got to tell you, and Tim will understand this, now that I've been secretary treasurer for my Tall Cedars chapter,
Kind of changes your perspective.
Wow. It is a different world.
Uh-huh.
And I just got to say, like, I have a feeling, and Tim, maybe you can back me up, I firmly believe that 50% of Masonic bodies nationwide, and if properly known worldwide, have no idea what they're doing financially.
Yeah.
Would you guys concur with that?
I think that's totally accurate.
I'd like to say my lodge is an exception, and I think we are. But
I think there are exceptions all around, but
yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that just happens organically. That's how we've done it for the last 75 years, and that's how they keep doing it.
I just feel like this, our forest has run fine for the past 100 years just by the grace of God, because there was enough members paying enough dues that things just and also they were semi-good stewards. There were no thieves. Nobody's stolen anything. But like, wow, like when I'm crunching these numbers now, it is frightening. And as an example, our dues are $35 per member. However, we have a good portion of our membership that are 50-year members that no longer pay dues. Mm-hmm. They also offered at one point, I guess it's still around, you can purchase a lifetime membership in our forest for a certain amount of money. And it was low, I think $500. So none of those people are paying dues anymore. Mm-hmm. So out of the $35 dues, we have to pay $17 to Supreme Council, and then another $3 to muscular dystrophy. Mm-hmm. So that leaves $15 times about 2/3 of our membership. Mm-hmm. The math just isn't there, exactly. And
Well, and the money that you've got coming in, in the good old days, you could take it down to your local bank and drop any surplus that you had into a CD for 6 months or 2 years or whatever, and get a decent rate of return.
3 or 4 points, yeah.
You could make a little bit of interest and stuff like that. Nowadays, you can't do that. Putting your money in a CD is just like putting it into your checking account. You're not going to make any money on it. And yet we have trustees all over the state in all kinds of Masonic bodies that have significant monies sitting in certificates of deposit, or as a good friend of mine calls it, certificates of depreciation, because it does not even keep up with changes in the economy. So, no, I totally back you up on that, Pete.
There's a reason. There's a reason, though, and that is, it goes, ain't broke, don't fix. So, but if you forever in your history as a body have used zero baseline budgeting, and you've got we're going to take in this much, we can only then spend this much. So you're never eating into your principles. So you never have to worry about that money that you've got put aside. It doesn't have to grow. It doesn't have to do anything because you're always revenue equals expense, and at the end of the day you might transfer a couple of dollars back and forth or whatever. There's a whole new generation of people that are coming into leadership positions, supreme or tall, grand tall and monarchs of grottos and even masters of blue lodges that are coming in, and no, we're going to have dinners. We're going to have the wives. We're going to do this. We're going to have that. And we're going to. So there's more money being spent, because if we don't do that, we're dead, because we have to pump life into it.
Right.
Because it was on such a downward trajectory. So it is happening. It is definitely happening. I don't know what we can do other than to tell people that are listening, to with respect, talk to your trustees, find out where the money is invested. They're supposed to be reporting on this in lodge. Right?
Well, that's one of the things we were saying, Tim. How did you phrase it? What should trustees be doing?
Well, in essence, trustees are only advisors to the lodge themselves. That money does not belong to the trustees.
Correct.
They are elected trustees to recommend changes to investments and so on like that to the lodge, not to make those decisions and simply report back. And I think in too many cases, we don't take the time and give that part of our work much time. And then, in all fairness, we don't train people. There's no training that goes on for trustees about how to do this stuff. It tends to be just somebody that's been in the lodge for a while and someone that's
somebody
respected.
who's been in banking.
Somebody that's
in the local Cedars chapter, it's the most 3 recent guys who go out of the East. Mm-hmm. So, I was a phone salesman, I know I have some business sense, but I've never owned a business. I've never had to really be the one ultimately in charge of a budget before.
Without naming any names, we had many years ago, 20 plus years ago, we had a fellow passed away and left us a lot of money. And they split the money in half, and they gave half of it to one trustee to invest and half of it to another trustee to invest. And one of the trustees who invested it in essentially CDs. And 10 years later, they looked at the numbers, and that half had no more buying power than when they put it into the bank in the first place.
Exactly.
It had just barely kept up with inflation. The other one had almost doubled. So, that was a bell ringer. That was like, hey, this is stuff you have to pay attention to.
We don't have a ton of money, but we do have a $30,000 permanent fund, for lack of a better word. If we could get 5% interest, that's $1,500 a year.
And unfortunately, the only way you're going to get that is to invest in the market.
Right. I'm just saying, and if I look at somebody like my former lodge that has, I don't know, just shy of 6 figures, if not 6 figures, or 7 figures, just shy of 7 figures or around 7 figures.
You're missing a figure there.
Like, I just really hope you guys have it invested somewhere better than a CD.
Yeah. Well, and there are all kinds of advisors out there that can provide advice to trustees and to lodges. And frankly, you should engage in conversations with, as most businesses do, almost like putting that out for bid every 10 or 15 years at least.
And the Grand Lodge has some resources in that.
The Grand Lodge has a lot of resources.
Not that you necessarily have to give all your money to the Grand Lodge, but they have people who can talk to you.
And I'm mentioning because I'm only becoming aware. I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
So, but generally in these bodies, if the money is in a permanent account, that can't be touched, but that interest can be put back into a general account and be used.
Well, and you think about it. I mean, obviously the last few weeks is not a good example of this, but over the last 10 or 12 years.
150 years.
Well, let's just say the last 10 or 12 years that's been going, the market's been doing quite well. And from a historical perspective, if you look at the history of the stock market,
long term,
any 10-year band over the entire history of the market, the stock market has gone one direction, and that's up. Yes, there have been peaks and valleys. There have been times like we're going through right now where there are forces that are coming to bear. The market corrects itself, all of those things. But in the end, if you smartly invest with the advice of a good financial advisor, there's absolutely no reason you can't make 8 to 10% easy on your money if you're willing to
over a 10-year span.
Over a 10-year, 12-year span.
So I'm 60. I'm not sweating my 401k right now.
No, me either.
Not a chance.
Might not open.
Neither am I.
You don't lose money until you sell.
Might not open the statement that's coming in soon.
Oh, hell no.
Just put it in the drawer and leave it alone.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, I think I speak for Tim, Larry, and myself that Jack and Josh, please keep working, keep paying in the Social Security.
Yeah.
I need your support.
I'm close. I'm close.
So that's a whole other show for another day. Maybe we can have another show out
Trustee
of that.
show.
Yeah.
It's
going on the
now.
board.
Boom.
Well, maybe not trusteeship, but trustees. Maybe.
All righty. So we'll take a quick break. We're going to hear from Michelle Snyder, Jim Stevens, who is probably going to talk about something about money, maybe, hopefully, I don't know. And then we'll come back with our news from Brother Cronkite, chickens, and what's going on, and we'll get the heck out of here.
Unlocking Symbols with Symbologist Michelle Snyder.
The gavel unlocked. Our golden key can unlock whispers of secrets hidden in all kinds of things. The gavel, for example. It connotes authority, begins and ends meetings, seats people in the courthouse, and punctuates the proceedings in a Masonic lodge. A symbol of power and leadership, the gavel has a long, prestigious, and practical history, one that can help enlighten us as to why it carries such authority. Information about the origin of the word gavel was all but non-existent, but according to Dr. Ensman, it originates from the verb phrase, to go. It is a call to action. It began with a mallet. The mallet was a tool used by megalith astronomers in the creation of a standard length of measure, necessary in the building of megalithic observatories. They had to be absolutely exact. Creating this measuring tool was done with a pendulum and a star. Counting the swings of the pendulum between the sighting of a star passing between two markers would prove the length of the pendulum cord, the standard length known as the megalithic yard. The whack of the mallet signaled when to start and when to stop the swing. A mallet was also used to pound pegs into the ground in the geometric formations necessary to divide a circle. The geometry of dividing a circle became the foundation for the division of time. Discovery of the Venus clock by the megalithic mariners made it possible. Division of a circle into 5, 6, and 7 equal parts was critical in preparing megaliths that included both solar and lunar sequences. Venus moves in a series of 8-year cycles, making a 5-pointed star. The star, really a planet, is a highly accurate clock. She times to the split second, long-term cycles, days, weeks, months, years, centuries. The tradition, science, and ethics that evolved from this are extraordinary and timelessly valid. The 5-pointed star pattern was reproduced on the ground with strings around pegs. The whack of the mallet pounding in the pegs became a signal for get with it, go to work, stretch the cord around the pegs. The patterns for megalith observatories were laid out on the ground with stakes and string. Whack. Hammer in a peg with a cord attached, and you can draw a perfect circle. This science was passed on through oral tradition for thousands of years, through many cultures, to the Templars. Then the knowledge was suppressed, and yet it survives as Masonic lore. Whack. The sound resounds through the corridors of history to our ears today. Whack. The gavel calls, and a master mason steps forward carrying the rod and cord. Freemasons and those who preceded them for thousands of years have preserved the traditions of history and science as a framework for truth. For more like this, get Symbology Revision. Next time, we will unlock the secrets in the tortured history of the swastika and Gammadian.
If you'd like to take a deeper look, be sure to check out Michelle's book, Symbology Revision. A link for purchase can be found on the Freya Foundation website. That's freafoundation.net. While you're there, take a look at some of Michelle's other works and find out more about the Freya Foundation and its mission to research and publish the Ensman archives. It's time for the Lodge Business Brief with Brother Jim Stevens.
Well, again, Masonic Lite podcast listeners, this is Jim Stevens with another Lodge Business Brief. I have said many times that one of the greatest parts of this fraternity is anyone can become a leader. The fraternity provides the tools and the means for any person, regardless of background and profession, to stand in the East and take their turn. That said, leadership doesn't just happen. We need to prepare ourselves to lead. Just like the candidate is duly prepared, so should we be for our time in the spotlight. We should ensure that when our time comes, we are as prepared as possible. Learning to lead is not a passive activity. You need to actively learn and develop your skills. Take advantage of sitting in other chairs. Actively seek out mentors and people who have already done it before you. Listen to what they have to say and ask questions with the intent to learn from the answers. Additionally, there are a few things that you can do by yourself that will accelerate your preparation. First, be willing to be wrong. Look at mistakes and errors as the tuition to learning. Being wrong may feel bad, but it is just a normal part of the progress. Reframing your expectations from fear and loathing to anticipation and gratitude will reduce the negative emotions. Second, be willing to review. After every meeting, conversation, interaction with a brother, you should mentally rewind it. Decide if there's any parts that you could have done better, things you would have changed, or incomplete sections. Identify at least one thing to change and find a way to make that change happen. You will have the same meeting, conversation, interaction again. If you don't learn and improve each time, you will be doomed to repeat the same errors. Third, read and listen. There are plenty of books, articles, and podcasts out there on leadership. You never know which of those will spark an idea that will be the next great event for your lodge. The more you absorb, the higher the chance of finding that spark. Fourth, just do it. Starting is the hardest thing to do. You will find plenty of learning opportunities as you lead. Take the first step and volunteer to lead something. Even a small one-day event is a great place to start. Additional ideas on how to develop your leadership can be found in my book, Lodge Business, the theoretical application of entrepreneurial business practices to Blue Lodge, available on Amazon. This is Jim Stevens with your Lodge Business Brief.
In Masonic news today, reports from the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania concerning the coronavirus were distributed to The Masonic news will continue when the coronavirus has been contained. Thank you for listening.
What happened to Brother Cronkite?
Cronkite?
Cronkite.
What happened to Brother Larry? You tried to ruin a bit.
Really?
Why? Because his freaking dentures are falling out. His partial just fell out. He's laughing so hard.
Oh, God.
Oh, goodness.
Wow. So, yeah, and we kind of mentioned it earlier. I don't know, who knows, after all editing, what's going to make it.
Show,
Were we here? Were we not here?
But apparently, yeah, there's going to be an announcement tomorrow, or if you're listening, last week, there's going to be an announcement. That, the Masonic Villages is going to, not be having any public functions.
No gatherings.
No gatherings.
Including, apparently, the Academy of Masonic Knowledge.
Yeah.
Which is a huge tragedy for...
So we need to find out, Larry, if the Grandmaster of Cuba is still going to be in town, so we can...
I will find it out tomorrow with Brian Hill. I doubt he will fly in for that, for not being there.
I bet he won't.
But I got something for him to meet.
Yeah, because I was hoping for, some Cuban coffee and that...
I want the cigars.
That bread you can, with the butter on it, that you dip into the coffee and the whole thing.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, I mean, when you think about our fraternity and the average age of most Masonic lodges is generously probably in the 70s or 80s. This is something that has the potential to.
Well, plus somewhere there's a good Masonic meme in here.
Yeah, exactly.
like without a handshake. How are we?
Yeah,
how are we gonna get all this done without any of these secret handshakes?
We can't do any handshakes. So, but in all seriousness, folks. Stay well out there, and hopefully we'll get through this. And it could be worse. I mean, we've heard stories of other jurisdictions that are canceling lots of meetings, and just stay well out there.
Okay, so we got a lot of stuff coming up, or actually some of the stuff just got scratched off. I was going to say the first upcoming thing was the Academy of Masonic Knowledge. So we will not be hearing former guest Chuck Dunning talk about the psychology of Freemasonry, and we will not be hearing Brother Victor Julian Avila Amatier about Freemasonry in Cuba. But I don't know, maybe we'll do something virtual.
It might be a time to reach out to our good folks at the virtual lodge up in Canada. And
yeah, meanwhile, they're having record growth right now.
Record growth up there, But seriously, it'll be interesting to see if this kind of thing changes the fraternity in some way to allow more virtual type of things to occur. I mean, obviously, the Academy, for example, there's an in-person component, but you can watch that from the comfy of your home.
Maybe I'll have to, instead of these fancy grips, I'll have to learn a sign language salute.
A flash.
More than just one finger that I know.
Yeah.
March 22nd, if this isn't canceled, I'll be in the Feast of the Paschal Lamb at the Valley of Reading. I'll be the Knight Steward Order. And if they do cancel that, I guess I'll do my part on air.
There you go.
Because it's public and you can hear it.
Okay, good.
I teach all about Passover. April 17 and to 19, the Pennsylvania Grotto Association will be meeting in Ellicottville, New York. I'm going to be riding up with former guest and Eagle Scout Jay Laser. We're going to be stopping at Straub Brewery in Mount St. Mary's, Pennsylvania. Or St. Mary's.
St. Mary's.
Yeah, and for educational purposes.
Yeah, of course.
May 8th through 10th, the Supreme Forest of Tall Cedars of Lebanon of North America. Convention's going to be in Wildwood. Then the Friday, May 16th, or May 15th and 16th. That's a reunion weekend here in central Pennsylvania with both the Valley of Reading and the Grand Valley of Harrisburg.
Indeed.
Have some stuff going on.
And Pete, I think you're in a couple of those degrees, aren't you?
I have a whopping 4 lines in the 32nd degree. And Larry will be observing
from a chair backstage,
monitoring Scott Helm lifting things.
I am scheduled to be in the 18th degree, by the way. Again.
Okay.
Will you be standing, or what is?
I have no clue.
No lines, though, right?
No lines. No.
Okay, that's perfect.
I'll be in a couple of degrees at the Grand Valley of Harrisburg, the 7th, I believe, and the 32nd degree. And I also have been informed that I'm going to be joining the line in the Lodge of Perfection.
Whoa!
In the Valley of Harrisburg. So
it's very prestigious.
I was excited to get the call.
That was nice of them to actually speak to someone.
I would like to think that was...
you should feel proud. I was there for 20 years. Nobody talked to me. May 18 to 21, the Supreme Council of Grottos. It's going to be in your neck of the woods.
Yes, sir.
In Kentucky.
Louisville, Kentucky.
And
or as we say, Louisville.
And another former guest of ours, Rick Santella, wanted me to tell you guys the Philadelphia Region High 12 clubs are going to be hosting their first ladies' night. This is September, so you got plenty of time to make arrangements to be here. The Harvest Ball, and tickets and everything will be. You can find it on in our show notes, and I'll give my notes to Josh so he'll know to put them on there.
There you go.
You guys have anything else that you want to cover?
I do.
Oh, God.
No, it's just briefly. Everybody knows that I love chicken pot pie. To me, it's the greatest Pennsylvania Dutch dish ever invented.
Chicken and dumplings.
Okay. No, chicken pot pie.
It's Josh's 3 favorite things.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Well, there is a pot pie dinner. Sandy Hoover is the pot pie specialist, by the way. Makes the best chicken pot pie I ever ate, actually. On Saturday, March the 28th, from 3 to 7 p.m. at the Lancaster Masonic Center. And it is a fundraiser to benefit one of the Masonic brothers. So again, if you're in the tri-state area, make that trip to Lancaster, tri-state, New Jersey,
what
New York.
States are those?
Just try any state.
Just try any state. Doesn't
what
matter.
about Delaware?
Just come on down
the first state,
for a really
Maryland?
Great chicken pot pie dinner. I will be there, by the way, to greet people and sign any autographs you may
Wasn't
need.
sure what tri-states.
Will you be shaking hands, Larry, or are you going to try not to?
I will have rubber gloves. That's my announcement.
All right, Larry, why don't you just take us out
Just get it out of here. Cue those chickens.
Yeah, there we go. Hey! Special thanks to our director-producer, Josh Lamberton. Always a great job. To our, who the hell do I usually... Oh, Effort Lodge, 665. 665 for allowing us to continue to broadcast from this beautiful studio in beautiful downtown Ephrata. Also to our Masonic Lite contributors, Jim Stevens, Dutchie Doug, and Michelle Snyder. Jack Harley, our news director.
Walter Cronkite, our news director.
Yeah, well, yeah, Jack's the news. He hires the talent.
Right.
Wow.
And Tim Dedman, our marketing director. So, everybody, thank you for all the great work that you do. I'm going to close up with a quickie tonight from John Goody from the Godolphin Lodge 7790, the United Grand Lodge of England. Now, a woman gets on a bus with her baby. The bus driver says to the lady, he says, "That's the ugliest baby I have ever seen. Ah!" The woman goes to the rear of the bus and sits down, fuming. And she says to the Freemason that's next to her, "The driver just insulted me." The man says, "You go right up there and tell him off. Go ahead. I'll hold your monkey for you." Thanks for listening. This is Larry. Have a great day.
This is Tim.
This is Josh.
This is Pete shaking hands.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Oh, and Jack, he's not here. He says bye.